Mr. McDonald, second time. Third time, Mr. McDonald? No? Okay, so we'll reach out to Mr. McDonald and see if he wants to come back to potentially another committee meeting or council. Okay. So, Bruce, are you ready to roll? We have you next on the agenda. I know you just got in your seat there. Are you ready to go? Is your presentation loaded and everything? Okay, all right, let's go then. So, upcoming report on the service review, the results of the service review for 2019, and this is the result of some funding that we received from the provincial government to help fund service reviews for municipalities across Ontario, and this is the preliminary results from KPMG. Just like to emphasize, it's very preliminary. These are things for us to consider and think about. There'll be no action taken today, and Mr. Murray, the Chief Administrative Officer, will add to that. Mike?
Great, thanks. Bruce, could you just put the first slide up? So I'm just going to do a little bit of background and introduction, then turn it over to Bruce Peaver from KPMG to go through KPMG's findings, opportunities, and then I've got one slide at the end. I'll come back and just talk about next steps. So this is just by way of background, reminders for council. Earlier this year, the province made available funding to large municipalities through, they call it the Audit and Accountability Fund. There were some reports to council, some staff recommendations about how to tackle this. We engaged a steering committee to provide some guidance, and based on input from the steering committee, council scoped out basically updating the 2015 service review and engaging KPMG to do that. The timelines that the province set for this funding were really, really tight. Basically all the work had to be done and a report made public by the end of the year. As part of that, KPMG updated what they call service profiles for all the region's services. That's probably 100 plus services, and all those service profiles will be available in KPMG's final report, which will be released later this week, I think. And based on that, KPMG's identified a number of, they call them opportunities to reduce costs based on services that are, that the region's not required to provide, and or services where regional costs are relatively high. And as I said, that report will be made public, I think it's later this week, and will be submitted to the province by the end of the year. So then I'll turn it over to Bruce to talk about the work they did and the opportunities they've identified.
Okay. Welcome, Bruce. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee, staff. It's a pleasure to be here again to speak to the committee on our work with the region of Waterloo on a service review. It's been a pleasure working with staff, and I must recognize the hard work that regional staff put into this project. And without their work, we wouldn't have achieved the results and the timeline that we did. So we were engaged by the region of Waterloo to conduct a service review update on the 2015 service review. And we had 4 specific objectives. The first objective was to provide council with an updated service inventory list, right, which we commonly call service profiles. The second one was, based upon these service profiles, outline where the region is exceeding its obligations and the estimated cost of the services where you exceed your obligations. The third objective was to identify those services which, when you compare them against your peers, you are a higher cost service agent. And finally, the objective was to obtain independent third-party recommendations for changing service levels and looking at alternative service delivery. We commenced the work approximately the middle of August, and we are now coming to a close on the engagement. In that period of time, we kicked off the project. We developed an updated service profile list. We benchmarked and we considered different opportunities that are available to the region, and we put together a series of recommendations and a final report. In general terms, Mr. Chairman and committee, I just wanted to talk to the findings at a high level before we get into the specific opportunities. So it's important at the front end to state that it is our belief that the region is actually a high-performing organization, okay? When I think of my clients across Eastern Canada, you are one of the leaders in service delivery. But we were engaged to find specifically opportunities for the region in areas where you are providing services more at a higher cost, or services which, using our methodology, we'd call discretionary. Okay? You have no legislative requirement to deliver those services. And this mandate that we had cuts to the core into many of the really, what I'd call neat things the region is doing that makes it a service delivery leader. But that said, our engagement was to find cost savings. And so what we've come up with is a list of 19 opportunities where there are services that are discretionary, or services where your costs are higher than your peers, or services where the cost of service delivery, in our estimation, could be subject to a review.
Bruce, I just want to interject for a second, but when you say discretionary, you mean services that are not required by the provincial government for us to deliver?
That is correct.
Okay.
So we have a methodology we use, Mr. Chairman, and we classify services as either mandated or essential or traditional or discretionary.
Okay. Because we use discretionary in other contexts. I just want to make sure that we're talking about non-mandated programs that we deliver.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So because you are a high-performing organization and you are cost conscious, there are very few opportunities in our report that we would, quote, call low-hanging fruit. That is, low-impact, high-return opportunities. Most of these opportunities, the 19 opportunities you have in our report, are what we'd call transformational, that will require significant change in your organization. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to just quickly take you through the 19 opportunities. So we want to first look at discretionary services. So you have the first opportunity is related to the immigration partnership, and you provide services for immigration, which is a discretionary service that the region has decided to deliver. The second opportunity is related to the Crime Prevention Council, and again, this is an opportunity that relates to a service that is, quote, discretionary. It's non-mandated by the province, and there is an opportunity to get out of that line of business. The third opportunity relates to discretionary benefits. So the region tops up the discretionary benefits that are provided by the province, and there is an opportunity to remove the top up on the discretionary benefits. Number 4 is social development services. So you provide additional services related to social development, and this is an opportunity, again, to withdraw from that area. Child care operations. So if you remember, back in 2015, we were in front of you, Mr. Chairman, talking about child care. So again, this is an opportunity for the region to consider. And the opportunity centers on the idea of examining your current business model, and there may be an opportunity to consolidate the number of childcare centers and review how you deliver childcare. As opposed to when we were looking at this opportunity in 2015, it was a more blanket recommendation to withdraw it entirely from childcare service delivery. Again, you provide services to Waterloo regional housing around community development. That's a discretionary service that the region does not need to provide. Museum services. So the region has an extensive museum infrastructure, and this is a discretionary service that has been provided by the region, and we're suggesting that there is an opportunity here to review how you deliver museum services for some cost savings. The region operates an international airport, and upon a review of the services that the region provides at the airport, we believe that there is an opportunity to review your business processes and achieve some savings in the delivery of air transport. Opportunity 9 relates to rebates you provide to nonprofit organizations on their property taxes, and there is an opportunity here to review this rebate program for the coming year. Number 10 relates to defibrillators. The region provides public access defibrillators and supports their distribution across the community, and that's a discretionary service, and there is an opportunity to achieve cost savings by withdrawing from that service. So the next series of opportunities, Mr. Chairman, relate to the cost of service.
Bruce, let me just
sorry.
pause there for a second. Councillor Jaworski, you want to ask the question now, or you want to wait to the end? You'll ask it now? Okay, hang on. Councillor Jaworski?
Through the chair, just on your slides you're going through here, in the upper right-hand corner, there's a disruption gauge. I was wondering if you could describe that a bit.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to the councillor. So, based upon our experience delivering these types of engagements across Canada, it's become apparent that you cannot only look at the potential savings that an opportunity may present. You also have to look at the impact that it would have in order for council to make a reasoned decision. So we attempted to create something called a disruption gauge, and the idea is to compare the disruption gauge against the potential savings. So the idea would be then, if there is potential savings of $50,000, but the disruption gauge is tilted way over into the red and to the right, then that would be an opportunity that you might want to reconsider. However, I'm making this up right now, Mr. Chairman, but if the potential savings are $1 million and the gauge is in the green or on the left, then that would be something that we'd commonly call low-hanging fruit. Mr. Chairman, to the councillor, is that okay?
Hang on, Bruce. Councillor Schatz?
Thank you. I was going to hold my question, but it sort of ties in. Is there a way, when we look at this information, to gauge what the financial benefit is of a certain non-mandated program that we run? So, for example, in the township, when we look at bringing people together and engaging volunteers, there's a dollar value to that we couldn't do ourselves because of the volunteers. Do any of these gauges, or is there any way to sort of measure that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the councillor, no, we did not consider that type of analysis in our engagement. This engagement is driven largely by the decisions in the past year by the province to rethink the municipal relationship and the funding of municipalities across the province. And so it was really driven by a fiscal bottom line result. And certainly, Mr. Chairman, to the councillor, I recognize what you're saying, particularly in smaller communities, but we didn't consider that. So the cost of service opportunities. So we're starting at number 11. So housing and homelessness system management. So currently, there is a administrative spend of that requires approximately 22 FTEs, and I believe my eyesight's going, but $3 million. So, Mr. Chairman, we believe that there is an opportunity here to review this and achieve some cost savings. As well, the region provides library services, and we believe that there is an opportunity for the region to rethink the service delivery model for library services and achieve some potential cost savings. These opportunities relate to the total cost of service, so where the region is spending a significant amount of money that materially affects the region's bottom line. And we suggest in some of these instances, these opportunities present a way for the region to reduce its overall expenditures. So the first one relates to client intake and financial assistance eligibility for Ontario Works. Okay? And we believe that a review of the process involved with client intake could achieve some cost savings. Number 14 is the funding administration for childcare. Again, we're suggesting that a review of how you administer the funding can achieve cost savings. Number 15 relates to the maintenance of your assets for Waterloo Regional Housing. We're suggesting here there is an opportunity to look at a different service delivery model, perhaps outsourcing, to achieve some significant cost savings. Number 16, similarly to number 15, is the overall facility management of the municipality. And again, we're suggesting that the cost savings can be achieved through examining an alternative service delivery model. Number 17 is the graphic design, multimedia video printing services that the region currently has in-house. And again, we think there is some opportunity here to review how you deliver this particular service. Number 18, like most municipalities, the region of Waterloo has a large fleet, and we believe there is an opportunity to review the utilization of your fleet and how it's employed to achieve some cost savings. Number 19, you're required as a public transit operator to also have a specialized transit service, and we're suggesting that a review of that service could achieve some cost savings.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Peaver. Councillor Jaworski, you got a question?
Yes, through the chair. Just clarity on the upper left-hand corner this time, possible savings. Is that the high water mark you expect, or is that the a target we should achieve? What's sort of the relevance of that? Say, for example, here, $800,000, $900,000. What does that represent?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, to the councillor, in many cases in some cases that reflects the levy that the region provides for the delivery of that service. And so if the region just determines that they want to withdraw from delivering that service, that would be the potential savings. In other opportunities, for example, where we're suggesting you consider the outsourcing of the opportunity, we use a ballpark number of 10% of your total expenditures, okay? And the suggestion being that if you decide to outsource, then you should at least recover 10% of your total costs. So that would be like a stick or a marker in the sand.
So along the same lines, Bruce, many of the recommendations identify, there's large ones and smaller ones, but on the smaller ones, you're talking about, say, 100 to 150,000, but it's a process review. So what's the cost benefit in something like that? Like, how much would it cost to review something to receive $100,000 savings?
So, Mr. Chairman, depending upon the complexity of the service, then the cost is adjusted, right? So if it's a simple process review, typically that's $40,000 to $50,000 a year, or it's $40,000 to $50,000 for the study. However, the return continues beyond the initial year.
Okay. Well, I know it would be a return for
Yeah.
a number of years in the process review. Okay. So is there a ratio there?
No, I don't have a ratio for you, Mr.
All
Chairman.
right. Okay. Thank you.
And so, Mr. Chairman, that brings us to the close of the presentation. There's 19 opportunities. Oh, sorry, my apologies. I wanted, Mr. Chairman, I was so looking forward to ducking
pretty
out.
easy on you, Bruce. I didn't think you want to get out of here that quick.
Yeah, it's okay. My apologies. Yes, there are the other opportunities for council's considerations, although you might wish I didn't present these. Anyway, there's grants to other organizations within the community, and so we're suggesting that there are grants that you might want to consider reducing or eliminating over the next year. And there's also opportunities that we generated over the conduct of the engagement that we thought might be better delivered through a series of working sessions with the committee, just so that you could treat it as an opportunity to further educate yourself on leading practice. The grants to other organizations are listed here for council's consideration. Thank you.
Okay, so back over to me just to talk about next steps. So I think, council gets a sense now, really reinforcing what Bruce said at the beginning, almost all of the opportunities that KPMG has identified, are disruptive in some way or another. Most of them, if you look at the wording of how KPMG's word the opportunities, need more investigation before council's in a position to make a really well-informed decision. So what we're proposing in terms of next steps is staff would bring a report to Budget Committee next week, December 11th, with the recommendations and seeking direction about what, if any, of those opportunities you just saw, council wants to consider as part of the 2020 budget process, recognizing that, as part of the 2020 budget process, you likely won't have had opportunity to engage the public and engage in more fulsome analysis. Also, that report will include a recommendation that staff work with the steering committee to bring back recommendations in January of 2020 about the remaining opportunities. And then we would propose to bring another report to council on January the 22nd with recommendations based on the steering committee discussion and essentially sorting these opportunities probably into three buckets. The first bucket would be, what are the opportunities that council wants to look into further in 2020? So that would be one. Second would be, are there opportunities that council wants to look into further, but just given organizational capacity and funding, we just don't have the ability to do that in 2020, but put that on the list to do in subsequent years. And then, there may be opportunities that for a variety of reasons don't merit considering further, either, minimal savings, too disruptive, or kind of other things going on, that make them inappropriate. So that's what we're proposing as next steps. I think you can see that, some of these opportunities would induce, some concern among some of our staff groups, some concern among community partners, and I think council providing as much clarity as possible, as soon as possible, about what are you going to deal with in 2020. That would be helpful, give people a bit of pause, and then signaling very early in 2020 which ones are going to be investigated further and which ones may be deferred. So I'm happy to answer any questions about next steps, and I think Bruce is happy to answer any questions about their report.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Murray. So it's clear for the audience's benefit and for those on the internet and the media that we're not making any decisions today. This is for information. There's no recommendations. There's still a process to be laid out to review the report more fully over the next few weeks leading up to budget. And as Mr. Murray had indicated, there's several areas in there that have been identified that we would have absolutely no opportunity, if we so chose to go that way, to incorporate them into this year's budget. Many of those reviews require further information, and that's some of the decisions that we'll need to make as we go forward. So I have several speakers. Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, through the chair. I think a lot of the things that we saw here today are really what make Waterloo Region special, and so are certainly hard to see. And Crime Prevention Council is a great example where all the upstream benefits of it, as you probably told Councillor Shantz, that some of these things aren't encapsulated in there, the softer benefits. On other opportunities for council's consideration, this is for both KPMG and for the CAO. One of the ones that really leapt out at me there was the hybrid vehicle, electric vehicle strategy, because it's very consistent with council's focus on climate change. And so yet I see it's put under other opportunities, didn't make the top 19. Maybe you could tell me why it didn't make the top 19, but more importantly, why it made the list anyways, because it seems like something that would pay benefits over a longer period of time, yet it did make your list. And I know maybe once we have your commentary, then we could hear from CAO on how it might fit in whether 2020 or coming years.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the councillor, the electrification of the public transit fleet was placed upon the list because we think it's a leading practice that the region should consider and that it does have significant benefits over time. However, it didn't make the top 19 because there would be a significant capital expenditure required by the region, and our mandate was to find cost savings.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Vanovic.
Thank you very much, and thanks for what's very much a comprehensive report. One of the questions, I have several questions, but just based on your response of the last one, and it'll come up in a few other places, how much have you factored in signals from both the provincial government and or the federal government in your likely recommendations to us? For example, on public transit, it's an area that has certainly been part of our advocacy through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities for $300 million a year over 10 years for moving towards electric transit vehicles, and it's one of the things that the current government in the campaign actually said that they would support. So in all likelihood, it's something that will show up in budget 2020. And we would want to be able to be responsive to it. So have you factored those kinds of things, or are you sort of just looking at purely what is actually policy at this point in time?
Bruce.
Mr. Chairman, again, I'll reiterate that our mandate was to find cost savings in this particular current year. The reading of the political tea leaves was outside of our mandate, and perhaps I can turn that over to your CAO to answer.
Well, I think on all those opportunities, one of the things that you saw was the disruption gauge, and there were 4 factors that contributed to that, that disruption gauge. One was strategic alignment, and that is something that that they've looked at, in terms of how aligned are some of these opportunities with the strategic priorities of the region? And, if you followed that along, actually a number of them were misaligned with our strategic priorities. And so I think they were looking at the region's strategic priorities because that's, written down on paper. I don't think KPMG really looked at, the strategic and political priorities of provincial or federal government. But I would say on, that list of leading practices, I think those are all things that, frankly, have been on staff's radar. Those are things that we think are worth exploring. Electric vehicle strategy for GRT, electric vehicle strategy for the region's fleet. So, how we explore it, whether we do it through a workshop with KPMG's, worldwide experts, or we do it in other ways, we think some of these things like electric vehicle strategy, totally appropriate.
Sure, and I fully expect that that's something that I and others will be looking to discuss further, even in this year's budget as we move forward. And that comment, the comment that I made in terms of these so-called tea leaves, I think also applies with respect to Opportunity One, because one of the other things that cities are looking to do is actually, like the province does now, is to be able to, cities and regions, to have a say in terms of immigration coming into our municipalities. And so that may impact, I think, where we go in that regard. On Opportunity 3, with respect to discretionary benefits, I'm just wondering, is one of the discretionary benefits that we're looking at there assisting people with sort of one-time situations around utilities? And when they get into trouble with utility costs? And I only raise that because a potential direction that we go here could have a secondary impact on us as municipalities that own our hydro utilities, and in Kitchener's case, our gas utilities as well. Because if all of a sudden there isn't a payment being made to help people in need, our utilities may be forced to make more significant cutoff decisions, which would have impacts in our community. Was that looked at all?
So, Mr. Chairman, to the councillor, the payments for or support for late payment on utilities is not a discretionary benefit that is covered by this particular service. I believe it's covered by an additional service that community service has.
Okay, great. So I can get additional information from staff on that. On number 9, with respect to non-mandated organizations, that was the section on property tax rebates. What do we consider non-mandated organizations, which only represented about 50,000 out of the 250,000 there?
So my understanding is that there are some nonprofit organizations that you provide support to, and these organizations it's a discretionary benefit to these nonprofit organizations. So again, there's an opportunity to review which organizations are included on the list to achieve potential cost savings. Perhaps, Mr. Chairman, your CFO can provide greater detail.
Mr. Dyer?
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair. So the list that appears on, actually, I want to make sure I understand the question. Is the question relating to the grants on item 30 or the property tax rebate one?
No, it was Opportunity 9, property tax rebates, and it says that about 50,000 of it is for non-mandated requirements versus out of the total of 250. So who would be included in that non-mandated group?
Yep, so I don't have the list in front of me. The opportunity as presented is basically the Municipal Act requires municipalities to have a program in place for certain, for registered charities up to a certain level. The region's policy goes beyond the level of rebate. If I recall, the mandated rebate is 40%, we provide 50%, and we also extend that that program to what's referred to as kind of other similar organizations, so ones that aren't mandated as part of the Municipal Act. and I apologize, I don't have the list in front of me, I would suggest that this is something that staff could bring back as part of the 2020 tax policy work in the spring of next year.
Okay, but I think for when we deal with this, certainly I'd like to at least have that list available.
Absolutely.
So if that can please be provided to us, that would be appreciated.
Certainly.
On number 10, with respect to public access defibrillators, and again, I understand your mandate is looking at savings to us as a region specifically. So is it safe to assume that it didn't look at what savings are to government in general if we're able to keep someone alive and not having them in ICU, and like the cost of the overall healthcare system, which I think would very easily eat up that $88,000 if you have someone in an ICU just a few days. Like, was that looked at all? Because I think that's part of what we need to consider as part of this process.
Mr. Chairman, to the councillor, we only looked at the immediate impact, financial impact to the region. We did not consider the more environmental, economic impact.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then on number 12, with respect to library services, I know this is something that the rural townships have identified as something that they're wanting to look at as well. Has there been sort of any alignment of that yet, or you've sort of independently identified it and they've independently identified it?
Mr. Chairman, to the councillor, both parties independently identified it.
Okay. So obviously that may be an area then that might benefit from for future discussion. I think that's all the questions I have. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Branovic. Councillor Galloway?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's really more a comment on the process. So being part of the review committee, we did debate at some length what all should be included on the list. And I think, Mr. Chairman, you have properly indicated the difference between discretionary and non-mandated. And I can tell you that we used no discretion in determining what was non-mandated programs. So we did not evaluate whether this non-mandated program versus that non-mandated program should be on this list. There was argument, as you might expect, that maybe certain ones shouldn't be on the list, but we chose to have everything put on the list. So it's not as if the review committee is recommending any or all of these. They are on the list because they are, for the non-mandated section of the report, they're on the list because they're non-mandated.
Okay, thank you. Chair Redmond?
Thank you, Chair Strickland. And just to dovetail on Councillor Galloway's comments, I did have the advantage some of around the horseshoe didn't, and that was being on the steering committee. And I would have to tell you that I want to thank Mr. Peaver and KPMG for doing exactly what we were asked them to do in a very short timeline. And I would suggest as we go forward, I would agree with Councillor Jaworski that we need to look at the merits of whatever reductions we have, because this is more than just a mathematical equation. However, that is what we challenged KPMG with, and that's what we will be challenged as members representing the community to decide on what competing needs are. I think it's really important, too, to look at service standards and when we're delivering above standards and when we're delivering at a higher cost than other standards. I think those are two really pivotal questions that may be politically defensible. And I would be willing to go to the mat on funding the arts and a whole bunch of other things that I would agree with Councillor Galloway are on this list because they should be. We need to have that discussion because a lot of the decisions past, present, and future will be political decisions that the people around this horseshoe will have to decide. This is what we want to invest in. And yes, it takes taxpayer dollars, or maybe we can fund it in a different way, but we choose whether it's discretionary benefits, the arts, or investing in more environmentally friendly technology. That is a political decision that we will make, but this is the exercise that we ask KPMG to do. And just to remind everybody, that was done because the province of Ontario offered money to examine how we could save money for taxpayers. And of course, we all want to make sure that whatever we invest taxpayers' money in is well spent and effective.
Okay, thank you, Chair Redmond. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. A question about organization. I understand the three categories that you've looked at. Where I'm just not clear is the other considerations. They were good enough to get included, but they didn't make the cut for the recommended 19, and I'm wondering what criteria were used there. Is it simply a matter of lower impact?
Mr. Chairman, to the councillors, so the opportunities in the other considerations section of the report. So there was, the first opportunity really was related to grants, and we recognize that that's very much a decision of regional council, and we just pointed out that you provide grants to these different organizations throughout the community, and there is an opportunity here to review that. So that's the first one. The second, there's, as we suggested with the electrification of the public transit fleet, there were some opportunities that we felt we couldn't prepare a substantive enough report to present to regional council. But we think that there are emerging leading practices in municipal government, and council should be aware and should be informed. And so that's why we suggested further working sessions where you could be presented on it by leading experts in the field.
Okay. So it had more to do with KPMG's sort of capacity to gauge it than it had to do with the value of the, or otherwise, of
Correct.
those items. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harris.
Okay, well, first off, I want to thank KPMG for this, robust report, but I think it's also fair that we thank our staff who worked along your side, KPMG's side, to pull all the required information to get us to a report that will hopefully be used in the near future. Clearly, as a member of the committee, we were tasked with coming up with and shortening the list per se, but a few months ago, it was only a few months ago that this council was likely tasked with a significant reduction in our 2019-2020 budget due to provincial funding cuts, shall I say. And so we started this process that will hopefully allow council to make current and future decisions based on good information. We all know and have heard of other levels of government that make knee-jerk reactions and arbitrary cuts without having good information at their disposal to make financial decisions that will actually impact the everyday lives of those who live within our community. And I think and I know that one of the first exercises as a council member was to go back and look at the previous service review that the previous council had undertaken. And forgive me if I'm incorrect here, but I believe that of the 5 recommendations that were put forward, none of them at the time were adopted. And so although we're not staring down perhaps a financial shortfall barrel that we were just months ago, this is a robust document that I would encourage all of my colleagues to spend some time with. And as the next steps have been laid out, come back with, I guess, a clear ability to actually move forward with some of these recommendations, knowing that in the near and short future, we will likely be tasked with making some difficult decisions. And I think this information that's been put forward to us today will allow us to reflect on what truly the values we have and are, and frankly, some of the businesses that we're in, perhaps we should not be in the business of being in them, so that we can provide for those core, responsibilities that the taxpayers of our region expect us to be in. And so I would just want to say thank you again to KPMG, but more importantly to our regional staff that worked alongside your team to come up with these things. They're never easy. And I hope that we thoroughly read these recommendations and come back prepared to, perhaps make some difficult decisions so that, in the near future when we have to, we arm ourselves with the proper information to make them. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harrison. And just for the record, in 2015, we did manage to get one of the recommendations through, and that's with respect to the airport. So we got 1 out of 5. Councillor Foxton?
Thank you. And I just want to sort of reiterate and build upon Councillor Galloway's, what he spoke about a few minutes ago. I need everybody to remember that we first looked at all non-mandated items. And then KPMG did a scale for us, showing us physically in diagrams as well as numerally wise what high-level impact. It did not get into the weeds. It did not get down into how do we analyze it. That's our job. And I think if we went to the next stages with Mr. Murray, he would explain exactly how that process will unfold in the future. So a lot of questions we have are the questions of breaking it down and seeing how we make it work or not work, or if it's not the direction we want to go in. That's our job. That wasn't KPMG's. They did a great job on what they were asked to do, and now the tough work comes to us. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Foxton. I have no other speakers, so I have a question then a comment. Bruce, what is the total of the savings that you identified, not including the other considerations, just the ones that in the 3 categories that you presented here today?
Mr. Chairman, the range is approximately $4 to $5 million. $4
to $5 million. Okay. All right, thanks. So, $4 to $5 million on a total operating capital budget of approximately $1.6 billion. Our levy is around 505, I was going to say 530, but it's $550 million. So obviously, when we look at those items, there are some that are much more sensitive than others. I think some, as some of my colleagues have pointed out, are program areas that are reflective of some of our values and some of the things we deem more important in the region of Waterloo compared to some of our other coterminous municipalities in Ontario. But I think that this is a very useful exercise for the region of Waterloo, and I think it's something that we need to take very seriously as we go forward and look at some of those areas where we are spending more than comparator municipalities. Look at some of those areas where we have processes that we could improve that could generate some savings for our taxpayers as well. And the reason I say this is because, I believe in the good that government can do. I believe in the great services that we provide at the region of Waterloo, but I am concerned about sustainability. In terms of tax rate increases and what our community can afford. You look at our draft budget, I'm quite certain we'll come in at less than the approximate 4% we're dealing with now. But you add on top of that lower tier municipalities, 2 to 3%. Like, we just can't continue to deliver tax increases at these levels much above the rate of inflation and not hit a breaking point sometime. So I think it's important for us as elected officials to go through this kind of exercise. It's going to be difficult, but look at these areas where it makes some sense for us to make some decisions on how we can adjust the programs that we're delivering to provide better value and more cost-effective services to our citizens. And that's what it's all about. And to me, that's just good fiscal responsibility. So I look forward to the exercise as we move forward. I'd like to thank the members of the Service Review Committee, with a particular shout out to Vice Chair Helen Jowett, who did a great job helping the committee stick handle through this as well, and to staff and to KPMG. So thanks to everyone. And now it's in our hands as we move forward in parallel with our January 22nd budget date. So thanks very much, everybody. Okay, Mr. McDonald, I got word that you have arrived. Are you here, Mr. McDonald? Oh, he left again? Oh, okay. All right, so, all right, we'll move on from that then. Mr. McDonald can catch up to us at a further meeting. Consent agenda, there's one item on the consent agenda. Motion to approve items are received. Motion for Councillor Kiefer. Councillor McGarry, all those in favor? All right. Reports, Bill 138, Plan to Build Ontario Together Act. Mr. Dyer, you got a comment on that? It's good news.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is the follow-up report. You may recall at Budget Committee back on the 13th of November, we had submitted a report with respect to development charges and with respect to Bill 108. Subsequent to the issuance of that report, Bill 138 was introduced. And so Budget Committee took no action on that report in anticipation of a follow-up report. This is the follow-up report with a couple of recommendations. So first of all, the first recommendation is to express the Region's thanks to the Minister for the proposed cancellation of the deferred development charge payments for commercial and industrial development, which is set out in Bill 138. I think this is a significant step forward and was an area of Bill 108 where the province received a lot of feedback from municipalities in particular. And I think we've had a number of conversations around this table and certainly at a staff level with respect to the implications of that significant delay. So that's the first part. The second part relates to, I would describe it as the remaining challenging changes put forward under Bill 108. So we think there's an opportunity here through Bill 138 to remove the remaining deferred development charge payments and to remove the section of the Development Charges Act that has yet to come into force with respect to when the calculation of development charges on a particular development is made. And right now that happens at building permit time. Bill 108 proposes to advance that calculation significantly and then freeze the rates at that point. All of that results in less development charge collections for municipalities. And then my final point on this would be, if you recall the Budget Committee meeting last week and the slide that we put up with respect to the risks to the region. And so the risks simply are that without a sufficient level of development charge collections and reserve balances, we need to debt finance the infrastructure in order for development to happen. And the risk to municipalities then, in the region in particular, then is that we need a certain level of development to happen in order to generate the revenue to fund those debt servicing costs, which we have no choice of but to spend. So that's the risk that we're trying to manage. If we can advance to the next slide, I just thought we've had some new information about the timing of this bill, which this is Bill 138. And again, Bill 138 amends the yet to be proclaimed sections of Bill 108 that have amended the Development Charges Act. So it's a little bit confusing. Bill 108 amended the Development Charges Act. Changes have not yet been put into force. Bill 108 now further amends that act. So first reading happened back on November 6th, second reading on November 27th. The clause-by-clause review is happening this week. Submissions were made earlier this week. Third reading is currently planned for December 9th. And that's why we felt it was important to get this report in front of committee today. Given the December 2nd deadline, which we were made aware of last week, staff have submitted the staff report as presented this morning to the province. Obviously, if council wishes to go a different route, we can advise the province accordingly.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Dyer. We have a question, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any problem with the recommendation, but I did have a couple of questions. And one it just has to do with Section 26.2. I don't understand the intent of that section. I don't understand how the province thinks that that will have an impact on housing supply. So I don't understand how deleting it will reverse that. But then more broadly, so if you can do a layman's version of that, I know that we issue grants for the development charges for affordable housing. Do we provide any sort of incentives for rental housing generally?
So through Mr. Chair, I think I'll answer the second question first. Sure. I think that answer is generally no, with one exception. And that one exception, which is the topic of the other report on the agenda today, we do have the new multi-residential property class, which does set a lower property tax rate for new residential development. So that is in place, has been in place for many years. I don't think there's anything else that we really do on the rental housing side, and there's certainly nothing specifically within our development charges bylaw at this point. That being said, we do have the policy in place for affordable housing projects that are approved through investment in affordable housing and other federal provincial programs. In terms of 26.2, so. I would say the province, I would say, has responded to developer concerns about development charge rates changing as the development plan happens. So right now, the development charge is determined at the time a building permit is issued. But of course, the time and the process leading up to that issuance can be lengthy. And during that time, for example, a new development charge bylaw could come into effect, which then has a significant increase on the rates that would apply, because we don't actually apply the rates until building permit. And so I think by the introduction of 26.2 of the Development Charges Act, that's the province's response to the development community who want to know, I would say, as early as possible, what their development charges will be down the road.
So it's about changing bylaws, not about changing plans on the part of the developer.
So this is about changing the act, and then therefore changing when we do the calculation. And the concern of municipalities is that the calculation of the development charge could happen years before that development actually happens. And one of the advantages of the 5-year refresh on the development charges bylaw is rates can be updated to reflect our most recent plans for the infrastructure required to service that growth, and more importantly, the more recent cost estimates. The risk to us is we're going to be collecting a development charge that was based on costs that are now years old. And therefore, again, we're not going to collect the revenue needed to fund the current cost of infrastructure.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are good questions, detailed answer. We need a mover and seconder for the recommendation. Councillor Fox and Councillor Clark, all those in favor? That's carried. Page 12, recommendation, no action with respect to requests from the Apartment Management Association regards to tax ratios. You have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Erb, Councillor Lawrence, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, Wellbeing Waterloo Region, Lori's got a couple comments.
Yep, and if I could start, and then I'll turn really quickly over to Lori. So Lori Fiozzi, who most of you know, our Manager of Strategic Planning and Strategic Initiatives. Wellbeing Waterloo Region has been one of the bigger strategic initiatives that Lori's played a significant part in over the last couple of years, and Lori's providing essentially the primary backbone support to Wellbeing Waterloo Region. So we just thought it was important for Council to get an update on the progress and status of Wellbeing Waterloo Region. So Lori's going to provide that.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to give you a really, really brief overview. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I know lunch is almost being served, so I'm just going to give you a really high-level overview. But before I start, I want to acknowledge Cynthia Martin, who's on secondment with us from Waterloo Region Police Services. She's been seconded for a 2-year period to work as backbone staff with Wellbeing Waterloo Region. And then our 2 Conestoga placement students, Lily and Killian, also providing backbone support to Wellbeing Waterloo Region. Wellbeing Waterloo Region is really a diverse kind of connected network of individuals and organizations really trying to make transformational change in well-being. It's community-led, and it's made up of many, many different partners from across the community, including the social service sector, education, environmental sectors, technology, culture, you name it. We have a long, long list of organizations and collaboratives that are involved with Wellbeing Waterloo Region. We've been working together for over the past 2.5 years, so we're fairly young in our conception. And basically, we've been working to identify priorities over the last 2 years. And those priorities, we were looking at finding the priorities that really we could make the most impact around well-being. And so how do we sort of do that? How do we figure out what priorities we would focus on? Because as you know, there's many, many needs and issues in the community. And so we began our journey actually first beginning with that kind of effort and looking at developing a measurement system that looked at data and trends over well-being over the community, and looked at those trends and had that sort of as one part of our information. And then we engaged in a whole 1.5-year process around engaging the public. What were the priorities? What were the most pressing needs of the community? And so through that, the discussions with the public, through looking at the trends and issues that we found in the data, we had sort of community process to figure out how do we funnel down to pick the first kind of focus. And saying the first focus because we're hoping that we're in this for the long haul, that we will be looking at different areas of focus as time progresses. And so basically we took the 2 pieces of information and came up with what we call the 3 big idea areas. And the 3 big idea areas or areas of focus are affordable housing. And we have 2 streams under the affordable housing area. One is to end chronic homelessness. One thing we heard in the community when we did the public engagement was that we can't have a thriving community if people are living on the streets. And so that was one of our things around intervention for Wellbeing Waterloo Region, was looking at affordable housing from the chronic homelessness perspective. The other was looking at innovative ideas around transforming affordable housing options. The other area was healthy children and youth. And so healthy children and youth, we were sort of in the background supporting some of the Smart Cities work with the data that was provided to the Smart Cities initiative. And now we actually have a meeting tomorrow to hear a little bit of an update around where do we go from here. So we are hoping some new directions around that. And then social inclusion being the 3rd big idea area. And just to kind of give you an idea of some of the actions that we've been working on, there's a placemat that's in front of you that just kind of gives you what we call our plan on the page. If you go to our website, Wellbeing Waterloo Region, there's all kinds of information about some of the actions that we've worked on over the past year. If you don't want your placemat, leave it here. We'll pick it up because we will reuse it. We're very conscious about that. But some of the examples of work that we've done, we found that through the public consultations that no matter what we did or what we would focus on, inequities, health inequities was a really big issue. Service providers, the system itself, not being aware of what those inequities were. And so we concentrated on providing equity and bias awareness training to our whole network, which we delivered over the past year. And that was over 400 people that participated in our equity training. We are looking at, we've created a video now that organizations who are part of our network can then take it out to their organizations. It has a discussion guide, and that will help with the ripple. We're saying this is training that we're hoping is going to continue to ripple out there. We formed our first Indigenous working group, the First Nation, Métis, and Inuit with community leaders, and we've been using them to help us guide our action with the initiative, as well as they've helped pilot a training that we've just finished, and we're going to be hopefully rolling that out in the new year with our whole network. Again, becoming more aware around Indigenous issues and applying that to the lens of well-being. You're familiar with the survey that we conducted with 5,000 residents. That was a big piece of work that Wellbeing Waterloo Region, we didn't fund it, but we supported it through our working groups. We're working on a campaign to end chronic homelessness. We've formed a strategic alliance with Leadership Waterloo Region and the Waterloo Institute on Social Innovation and Resilience to support readiness to make transformative change in affordable housing. And those are just some of the examples of some of the work that we've done. We've created reports on the measurement of our well-being across the community. We're digging down deeper into some of that work going forward. So you might ask, who's responsible for the actions and outcomes of Wellbeing Waterloo Region? And I always say it's a larger answer. It would be easier to say it's one organization, but actually it isn't. It's many, many organizations that contribute and take responsibility for our actions. The region provides the host or backbone support for the initiative, but we don't lead the initiative. We don't make the decisions. Everything gets sort of put back out to our working groups, and they provide the direction based on data and based on public input, and then their discussions around that. So really, it's collective action to create the change that we're hoping to see. We have an enabling structure that all of this work is done through, which was detailed in your committee report. But we do have lots of community partners who are involved in this work. And sort of coming up, what's next? We continue to work on the actions because our plan goes to the end of 2020, and then we're going to look at a potential refresh. But really, we're discussing right now in talks with Crime Prevention Council on how do we better align and coordinate our two initiatives. We're both sort of focusing on some of the same pieces of work. How do we sort of better work together? And actually, with the premise that I think actually we could do this better together because we have the skills and the abilities and the interests to do that. And then the other piece is looking at the community safety and well-being legislation and how does Wellbeing Waterloo Region and Crime Prevention Council's work fit to meet the legislative requirements of the community safety and well-being legislation. So those are some of the next steps. We plan to come back to you with a report, a joint report from the Waterloo Region Police Services, Crime Prevention Council, as well as Wellbeing Waterloo Region, to say how we are sort of recommending some of the next steps for the community safety and well-being legislation.
Okay, thanks very much, Lori. We got three speakers, Foxton, Jaworski, and Kiefer. Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and through the chair, excellent job. I love this.
Great.
But you know what, could you send it to Michelle Passant at the township so she can Facebook and tweet it out? See, the township has a bit of a disconnect. They are really at arm's length with the region, and unless I push and promote these things, they don't know they exist.
Okay.
And so I think we can get more connectivity the more we promote. And I mean, I'm not asking for just this. I'm asking for regular, sending it regularly, like even monthly or every 2-3 weeks, to Michelle, who will re-promote these so that we get a higher profile of what the region actually does for the townships. Thank you.
Through you to the chair. We have a regular newsletter that we send out, so I can get you subscribed and you can get all of our ongoing updates. It tells you when our trainings are, when all of the events are happening. So, and we would love you to get involved in some of our working groups.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, through the chair. So just looking for a little bit further information. So like on affordable housing and homelessness, where obviously has a key contact with Ryan and other places of the region, how is that, how are they engaged, or are they actually part of this group? How does that work?
Yes, so the region of Waterloo is part of our All-In Catalyst group that we have that's looking at ending chronic homelessness, and we're just working with the housing division to see how do we sort of how do they help us with some of the work that's happening around the stream around the affordable housing transformation. So we're hoping that they will absolutely be a lead in that. They're presenting at all of our forums. We have one coming up this Thursday night, so absolutely they're a part of it.
Thank you. And just to the chair, I know we seem to go from KPMG into the Plan to Build Together Act. I wonder if we missed the 2020 temporary borrowing bylaws, unless I put up my hand and approved them, I don't know, but I'm not sure if we did that or not. Item 6.1.
Okay, take that under advisement. Councillor Kiefer.
Thank you, Chair Strickland. Lori, thanks for the presentation. It's excellent. My question I have, though, is around the affordable housing. The second bullet, work with landlords to increase the number of rental units available, which is a good thing. But I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little more. Is that meaning that we are to somehow present incentives for the developers, or is it cash that we're offering, or in-kind service, or where is that going, or how is that going?
There are a couple of things that the All-In Group is working on around landlords. Part of it is to get more landlords involved and sort of break down some of the barriers around people sort of assuming stereotypes around people who are homeless or who need affordable housing. And then also some of the things we're looking at is having a fundraise pool that will allow sort of like a security deposit for some of the landlords to take, so that they'll be more encouraged that if something does happen around damages, there is some kind of supports there. But the All-In Group that is working on this has a lot more details, and we can provide you with further information if you'd like.
Well, thank you. I was just wondering, who all would be involved in that, whether it would be the region with the lower tier municipalities or who or what, So, yeah, if you can send me that information, that'd be great. Thanks.
Great.
Okay, I have a couple other speakers, Councillor Jowett and Chair Redmond.
Thank you, through the chair. And so, Lori, when I guess affordable housing's on everyone's mind, we know that, right? But when I'm looking at the Landlord Tenancy Board, do we have them as an active participant around the table?
So I would have to look at the membership list. I'm not 100% sure, so I would need to check into that.
So a young lady who ran in 2014 actually started up the Landlord Tenancy Board in Cambridge, and I think she has a Facebook page, and she's continually trending some of the challenges as a landlord. So I think she's got a wealth of knowledge. I actually asked her to come in and speak here at one time because of the barriers to getting housing for everyone. But she just had a baby. But I think there's probably somebody on that board that could probably help with removing some of those barriers, or at least understanding why some of the landlords are having a hard time. As you said, sometimes it's damage, whatever might help. And then the other thing, how are we ensuring that wait lists are current and accurate? Because we know that there's an inflow in different communities. There's gentrification, there's people being moved around communities, people who are closing shelters, creating different numbers in different places. Are we doing anything that kind of monitors inflow and people coming and going?
Yeah, so the region of Waterloo Housing is tracking that, and so they have a system that they provide the information around wait lists and also the numbers that are on the homelessness list.
Okay, thanks for that.
Okay, Mr. Murray.
Yeah, and there are a number of questions about affordable housing. One of the things that I would just emphasize is, you'll recall council approved quite recently the homelessness and housing 10-year plan, the 5-year update to that, and the Waterloo Region Housing Master Plan, right? So those are very recently approved. And you also recall some of the key elements of that were, engaging community partners in exploring all manner of innovative solutions to increase the supply of affordable housing. So that's on sort of the to-do list for our housing folks. And there's like active discussions going on between Ryan, the housing team, Lori, Wellbeing Waterloo Region, other kind of funding partners to say, how do we do this together so that, this happens in a kind of an integrated, coordinated way. And I think the belief is if we do it together, we truly can make a transformational impact on affordable housing in the community. If everybody keeps working in their little silos, we'll miss it. And so that, I think, is our sort of opportunity. I think Wellbeing Waterloo Region has laid a really good foundation for us to build on and engage, the region as a partner, area municipalities as partners, service providers, the private sector, developers, landlords, and that was the vision of Wellbeing Waterloo Region from the get-go, is engaging a whole host of community partners to say, how do we work differently together to make transformational change? And so, that doesn't happen overnight, but I think we've built a good platform to move forward on.
Okay. Thank you. Chair Redmond?
Thank you, Chair Strickland. Laurie, you already answered a couple of my questions, which was how does this Wellbeing Waterloo region on a go-forward basis look at what is now mandated, prescribed by the province for the police and community to put their shoulder to the wheel. I just wanted to highlight another bullet under affordable housing. Clearly, it's something that we're all concentrating on. But any councillors, and there's a few around the circle, I know Elizabeth and Tom were at, and I think Dave too, and Catherine at the National Housing Celebration a week ago. And Leadership Waterloo Region, with this funding from a major local developer, is looking at a multi-year project on how we crack supportive and affordable housing in Waterloo Region. It's a very exciting initiative. So in the partners that we talk about, Waterloo, Wellbeing Waterloo Region has also animated and engaged the private sector, and I think everybody has to be at the table. So it's a very exciting innovation and a great opportunity for the people participating in Leadership Waterloo Region.
Okay, no further speakers. Thank you very much, Laurie, for the update and presentation and the great work. Obviously stimulated much interest from council, so good job and keep up the great work. Now on to something even more exciting. Municipal Benchmarking Network Canada. Mr. Murray?
Now, how much more exciting can things get today? So we do this, so I think most of council knows the region is a partner in MBN Canada, Municipal Benchmarking Network Canada. It used to be called OMBI, Ontario Municipal Benchmarking Initiative. It's now, it has over the last number of years expanded nationwide. So it's got, I think, like 15 to 20 member municipalities across the country. We do an annual report on, the region's metrics that are collected as part of MBN Canada. And so that's what you've got in front of you. I think it's interesting and timely, and actually it's coincidental relative to KPMG being here. But, what Bruce led off with is, overall, this organization is operating efficiently and effectively. And it's not just me as your CAO saying that. The data that's collected through MBN and compared with similar municipalities across the country really demonstrates that. And I think what it shows is on just about all the measures, we are in the, for sure in the top half and often in the top, quartile, top 25%. And I would say on almost all the measures, the trends are going in a good direction. Either we're becoming more efficient, more effective, providing better service. And this is something that, we actually spend a fair amount of time and energy on gathering this data because it is comparable. And municipalities have invested a lot of time and energy in trying to make sure that the data that's collected through MBN Canada is comparable and is reliable. And it I think it is and should be a useful tool for council, for sort of an objective analysis of kind of overall how are things going. So it's here for your information. If you've got any questions, either in general about MBN or specifically, we'll try to answer them.
Okay, we have a question right now. Councillor Jowett.
Yay. Thank you, through the chair. So on page 45, general government, page 88, the region's cost for general government, including costs related to governance and corporate management as a percentage of total municipal costs, increased slightly in 2018 and is at the median for the upper tier municipalities. General government, it says slightly, but I'm not sure. Do you mean it's slightly increased and that's just the typo? Like I know that a lot of them are favorable, whether they're above or below, but this one here is a little bit harder to get at. The region's cost for general government, including costs relating to governance and corporate management as a percentage of total municipal costs, increased slightly in 2018. Okay, sorry. So in general, it has remained the same. But when I started to look through, like I tried to look at it from that perspective when you mentioned we just did our government review. So I was looking for things that might be nuggets that could help us with that. And so then the question I had was, has outsourcing played a role in any of the key measurement of some of these things?
Yeah, perhaps. I think the sort of overall efficiency and effectiveness is, it's just the result of ongoing, I'm just going to call it good management practices over the years. And so, that's a combination of, outsourcing where that's appropriate, Jane's going to talk in a second about, we created a couple years ago our Office of Corporate Performance to be a focal point within the organization for performance improvement activities. So, whether it's Lean Six Sigma process improvement activities, whether it's, strategically looking at what do we take on ourselves, what do we outsource, it's dozens of those decisions, sort of management operational decisions over the years that I think contribute to this. The other thing I would add in light of, KPMG being here earlier, so they had access to all this information. So this was made available to them actually before it was made public. So KPMG, when you look at some of the comparators in the service profiles, this was one of the sources of data that KPMG used in their comparators.
And so so are the comparators pretty valid for us, Mike? Because you don't get to choose who those people are that actually subscribe to this particular association that you mentioned. So do they line up with us?
So it includes all of the regional municipalities in Ontario and a number of large single-tier cities across Ontario and across the country. So I actually think, given these questions, what we should do is, I don't think it's in the report, we'll send council a list of who the MBN member municipalities are.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much. No further questions. Thank you, Mr. Murray. Office of Corporate Performance, Jane's got a quick update for us.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're pleased to provide an update on the Office of Corporate Performance. We wanted to highlight some of the results that have been achieved since its inception in 2016. The region has adopted Lean Six Sigma as one of our preferred tools to ensure that our programs are optimally efficient and continually improving. So we're also very pleased with the way the organization has embraced corporate performance as a way of doing business, and the results we feel are very promising and continue to demonstrate the interest of the organization. And
Excellent.
I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, no questions. Good work. I don't know how many municipalities are using Lean Six Sigma. Probably not too many. And that's directly related to the benchmarking results, I would say, as well. So good work. All right, council inquires request for information, seeing none. Other business? Next meeting, the motion to adjourn. Councillor McGarry, Councillor Schatz, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. We're adjourned.